Hello, everybody, and welcome to the GLOBIS Stories podcast. I am your host, W. Tanner Kirk, and today I am joined by Lucky Maduna, a current full-time GLOBIS student from South Africa.
Yes, Tanner, thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Welcome to the show.
Yes, thank you.
So, Lucky, like we just said, you're originally from South Africa, but of course we are currently sitting in Tokyo, Japan. So I'm curious, what drew you to Japan? Why Japan?
Of course, as you've mentioned, thank you, Tanner, for the wonderful welcome. I'm a South African, a very interesting country, a multicultural country, very diverse, not just in terms of culture, but in terms of our history. We have a very rich history. But what drew me to Japan, Japan is more, by and large, a homogeneous society, but very interesting one, in that it has a very rich history, very good history. Growing up in South Africa, I was introduced to Japan indirectly because we always had, especially in the automotive industry, the likes of Toyota, Nissan, Honda, and what comes to mind when I think of Japan, having grown up in South Africa, is quality, because those vehicles are known for quality, for endurance, and really for very good type of cars. But I had an opportunity to almost live in any parts of the world, mostly in Europe, except Asia. So I thought, why don't I just finish the puzzle by coming to understand the Asian culture? Of course, I know that Japan doesn't give you the full-blown Asian experience. It has its own culture, it has its own feel. But yeah, that's what by and large drew me. It was a quest to rediscover myself, but also get to know the rich history of Japan.
Awesome, super cool. So you were born in South Africa, but you've lived in Europe. When did you move to Europe originally?
So the first time I moved to Europe was around 2009, and then I had an opportunity to move to the UK through my work. I used to work for a mining house. In fact, that was not the first time. I think to work, that was the first time. Okay. But my first experience in a professional setting was as an exchange student. So I went to University of Pretoria originally, which is in South Africa. And I was an exchange student to Zurich in Switzerland, where I completed my undergrad degree. So that was my first fully blown experience in Europe as a grown-up, as a teenager, although I had been there because I had a number of family members across Europe.
So you had mentioned coming to Japan is kind of like completing this quest to experience life in these different cultures. But was there an original drive to leave South Africa? Like, have you always been interested in travel and other cultures, or what brought you to Europe besides family, or was it family?
I think I've always have had an interest and curiosity to know what exists beyond South African borders. Because as you know, South African history, we were sort of isolated for the longest time. And I'm not that young, so I was born during the dark years of apartheid in South Africa. So that meant we had sanctions, we couldn't travel, we were segregated. We were aloof from the rest of the world. So when the doors eventually opened, as much as I was young at the time, which is in '94, at the dawn of our democracy, I think for any South African, the natural thing was to then travel the world, leave our shores, and get to see the other parts of the world, including the African continent, by the way. Right. So by and large, there's my quest to travel, to get to know other cultures, to live elsewhere. I mean, the world has become a global village. So for me, that is how I've always seen it, that there is a better life beyond South Africa. Of course, South Africa is a beautiful country, naturally beautiful, beautiful people, beautiful culture. But I've always had this quest to know what exists beyond our shores. And yeah, that is what then drove me to leaving my country. Well, I had an opportunity, as I said, as an exchange student, and subsequently had a job for a mining house in the UK, and then I, at a later stage, lived in Germany for 8 years through my work. So yeah, it's been a very fulfilling and good experience.
That's awesome, man. I'm really interested in your journey particularly because I think so many people, and not that it's a bad thing, but typically when you ask people like what inspired you to come to Japan, especially from an American perspective, it's like Dragon Ball Z, you know, it's like watching anime was super popular when we were kids in the States, and I feel like that was a lot of people's gateway to wanting to experience other cultures. So you're one of the first people, I think, that hasn't mentioned like anime or video games or something like that as being what inspired you to come to Japan.
Of course, that is part of what Japan is known for. Anime is, I think it's one of their trademark. But for me, it was mostly the automotive industry. I mean, if you look at Toyota, their biggest market is the African market. So any part of Africa, you will find a Toyota of some sort. Whether you're talking about public transport, because we rely a lot on public transport, which is sometimes not so reliable, not so good. So Toyota has been, it's the first thing that you see, whether personal vehicles or, as I said, public infrastructure vehicles, whether you're talking buses, minibuses, trucks, you will always see a Toyota. And then the curiosity starts to say, where is this from? So yeah, my journey is different. It's been mostly driven by me wanting to understand what makes Japan so different. I mean, it's one of the few countries where they have companies that has been in existence for more than 100 years, more than 150 years. What makes them get it right that we are not able to do as an emerging economy? So my quest has been more at that level to try and learn. For instance, Toyota, again, seems like I'm giving them a lot of airplay.
Sorry.
They have Kaizen, and I've always known about this concept to say, what drives this Kaizen?
Could you, just for the people listening, could you explain what Kaizen means?
Yeah, so Kaizen is basically how they go about, is the concept of how Toyota goes about doing their business, looking at the quality aspect of perhaps from the concept to the quality of the car that they produce, and also continuous improvement. So looking at the whole end-to-end cycle. So it speaks about basically making sure that the products that they produce really are of a good product or above reproach, if you were to use that word. I think that's the simplest way of putting it.
Yeah. I'll link it in the description down below, but Globis Insights has a couple articles about Kaizen and that process with Toyota. So if you guys are interested in learning more about that, you can check it out. Speaking of wanting to learn and experience different cultures, Lucky is a bit of a polyglot. You said you speak over 6 languages, like 6 African languages, I think you said, right? So I'm curious, how many languages do you speak?
So by and large, I think I speak about 9 to 10 languages. It could be more, but I think the one that I'm more conversational, very confident in, they're about 6 to 9. And they range from, it's not just dialect, because I'm sure someone watching this is like, is this a dialect? No, it's full-blown languages. So they are mostly, the 6 languages are mostly spoken in Africa, not just South Africa. So by and large in the SADC region. Don't know if you want me to go through the list.
I would love to hear.
And then 3 or more that are spoken outside South Africa, which you will call more international languages, such as the one we are conversing with now, English, Dutch, and of course German. I have to speak Dutch because, of course, for me to live in Germany, I had to speak German. How it came about, so again, our history as South Africa, Dutch played a very important part of that history, whether positively or negatively. So we don't call it Dutch, we call it Afrikaans, but it's similar. So I had to do that at school. It was one of my languages. And I did very well, actually, in that particular language. So yeah, that is how I that's how that came about. And I think I've already articulated how German came about. I had to develop an interest because of work opportunities. But then the African languages, my indigenous language or home language is isiZulu or Zulu, which is widely spoken in SADC, in the African continent. I mean, if you watch The Lion King, that's the language that they use there or they sing. Yeah. Including the Circle of Life song. It's inspired by isiZulu. And then, of course, we have isiXhosa, which is related to Zulu. So Zulu is part of the Nguni language, which has about 4 languages within it. So it's Zulu, Xhosa, Swazi or Swati, and Ndebele. So the Swazi or Swati is also spoken in Eswatini, which is a country within South Africa. Okay. And then Ndebele is widely spoken in Zimbabwe, which is our neighboring country, but also an official language in South Africa. Then there is other languages such as Setswana, which is spoken in Botswana, which is our neighboring country, but it's also an official language in South Africa. And then there is Sotho, South Sotho, which is spoken in Lesotho, which is a country also within the borders of Africa, but it's an independent country. Okay. It's an official language in South Africa. We have about 11 official languages as a country, including sign language. Right. So having grown in South Africa, as I said, you have a very rich culture, very diverse nation. You can't help it but become part of that rich culture. Sure. Yes.
Yeah. I was curious about, because I've heard of Afrikaans, but so if you speak Afrikaans and then can you speak with someone that only speaks Dutch? Like, is it applicable?
Yes, it's very applicable. You will be able to understand each other, although there is always this argument from Dutch speakers that it's more like kitchen Dutch, if you know what I mean. It's a watered down version of Dutch, but you fully understand what the Dutch person is saying. Perhaps what you will, certain terms interchangeably, but certain terms may mean something else in Dutch. But I mean, as an African-speaking person moving to Netherlands, it's a natural process. It's like me as an English native speaker moving to England. It's just natural process. It could be different in terms of how we articulate, different in terms of how we use certain words, verbs, nouns, and so forth. But basically, it's more or less the same.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean about like kitchen Dutch. Before I moved to Japan, I was actually a professional cook in Philadelphia.
Yes.
I wanted to be a chef. That was like my original goal. But because I worked in kitchens so much and there's like a large Spanish-speaking population in the restaurant industry in America, so I learned kitchen Spanish. And we use that term a lot in the restaurant industry in the States. So it's kind of like broken Spanish that you pick up. Of course, Afrikaans is like its own language.
Its own language. It's as you said, I wouldn't use the word broken. It's more rudimental. Right. So the settlers were not just from Dutch, or they were not, just from Netherlands or Holland. They were also from Germany, and they were also from France. Right. So they had to find a language that was common between the 3 of them. Right. And then that's how this language was actually formulated or came about. Right. And then they termed it Afrikaans because it was in Africa. Right. Yes, to say it won't be Dutch, it won't be French, it won't be German, but it will be African.
Yeah, thank you for correcting me. It's definitely not like a broken language, but I understand the sentiments. We also, like in Pennsylvania, we have Pennsylvania Dutch, which is like, I think it's actually closer to German. It's like a German dialect, but they call it Pennsylvania Dutch. But we have, there's a group of people in more rural Pennsylvania that speak this like very specific language that's a offshoot of German because of like the German settlers that came to America all those years ago. So yeah, I mean, it's really crazy the way that languages come about. But to get back on track, what I wanted to talk to you about is you're a polyglot. You speak all of these different languages. And I think a lot of people that are interested in coming to GLOBIS are obviously from elsewhere in the world. And so language learning is a big part of the process, moving anywhere. You lived and worked in Germany for 8 years, and you said yourself, in order to thrive in Germany, you had to learn German. So I'm interested to hear your philosophy of language learning, acquisition. Like, how do you go about learning a new language?
I think first you have to develop an interest. Interest not just in a language, interest in the culture, because language is culture. If I do not recognize your culture, then I'm less likely to learn the language. So how I see it is that you first develop an interest in the culture, to say the way of living for this particular nation, what informs them, what's the history, and so forth. And then you develop the language, the interest to say, okay, I'm now going to learn their language because it says, I see you, I recognize you, and I feel you. And how I do that is that I learn your language, because language, just like names, when you speak someone's language, whether it's just greeting or when I just call your name and say Tena, I get closer to your heart than if I refer to you as a he, if you know what I mean. I do. So that's how I see it, is that language is also a form of appreciation of a culture, appreciation of a particular nation, and respect. For instance, we are in Japan. I might not be fluent in Japan, but I definitely have an interest in the language because I am here. It's part of, okay, Japan, it's my home now. They are hosting me. So to show respect, I have to learn their language because in learning their language, that means I will understand their way of doing things.
I think that's an incredible perspective. I think a lot of, even for me, I can say in my own experience with learning languages, it's like I don't enjoy book study, you know what I mean? I've never been one to be able to sit down with a textbook and do grammar drills and really absorb it. And I think that's just the way that a lot of people either feel like that's how you have to learn a language, like that's how it works, or that's the way that they're guided towards. But I found what's really worked for me, well, first off, like what you said, I've lived in Japan for 9 years, and it really is my second home at this point. So I also do feel like a sense of responsibility to, it's my duty, right, to be a foreign citizen of Japan. You have to be able to communicate in Japanese. But also, to your point as well, it's like being interested in just like approaching language acquisition as just a part of your life rather than like studying. Like I personally don't like to say I'm studying Japanese, because just the idea of studying to me makes it like not fun, you know, it makes it feel like a chore. So it's just learning Japanese, you know, by reading or watching TV, communicating with people, like you're always learning. But I really like that mindset of A, wanting to connect with the culture and understanding that it's a responsibility, and then B, like you said, making sure that it's something you're truly interested in rather than forcing it.
Yes, because small things matters when it comes to languages. Things like pronunciations, names. They have some historical context. So my name might mean something else to someone, my African name, my African name. But when you speak to someone who speaks my language, there is depth to it, and there is an understanding, there is a respect to it. So I think same approach can be afforded to languages. That language is not just a form of communication, but language is a form of expression, way of life, and gives you a very good historical context of a nation, of a group of people, of a tribe, and so it goes. So that is how I see it. And the best way of learning languages, for me, it's twofold. There is, of course, the traditional way of doing it through going through school modules and so forth. I find that a bit more technical because that just tells you the right way of speaking the language. There's really no connection. For me, I think the best way I've learned languages was firstly understanding the people, understanding the context, understanding their history, understanding how the language came about, understanding their way of living. I found that has helped me to give me so much depth and even connect at a higher level than just my ability to sprechen Deutsch, if you know what I mean. Yes, because I have an appreciation of their people, of their language, of their culture. and the context under which their language came about.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. I can totally relate to that. I mean, I think like English and Japanese, it's quite difficult to translate between the two. And a lot of the essence of a message can get lost in translation. Like that's where that term comes from, obviously. But the more that I've learned Japanese, like you really do get a whole different perspective of the culture. You can understand people better. I think Japanese is a much more subtle language. English is the type of language where you basically, you just say what you mean.
Yeah.
You know, and there's not a lot of ambiguity there.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's totally, I agree with you. But Japanese is a language where there's so much like subcontext to what's being said. And that was hard for me to grasp at first, but it really does kind of widen your horizons. And speaking of that, I like this idea of like it's completing the quest, like this globe-trotting quest. So you're working in Germany. What made you decide that it was time to move on? And then what about GLOBIS? How did you originally find out about GLOBIS? I'm curious to know, like why GLOBIS, basically?
So I've always been very ambitious.
I couldn't tell.
I was extremely ambitious young person, not only driven by academic achievements. I think that was quite innate or natural for me, but I was always driven by ability to always know what I don't know. So at some point, I really had self-introspection with me. I had difficult talks with myself in terms of how is my future going to look like? How's my 5 years going to look like? And I came to a conclusion that in order for my future to look the way that I had seen it to be when I was doing that introspection, it will be prudent for me to take the next step, which is to embark on this full-time MBA. And then I started the process of then exploring to say, okay, how do I go about, where do I go, and so forth. And while I was going through that process, I happened to then meet the team from GLOBIS, the European team, Sven.
Hey, Sven.
And I must tell you, probably GLOBIS was business school number 7 or 8. Yes, because
on your list?
Yeah, on my list, because not on just my list. I was very intentional to say I don't want just another business school. I've been to a business school before. Okay, I don't want just another business school. Sure. But it has to speak to me. It has to mean something. And I must tell you, the day I met Sven, I just knew it. Okay. I just knew it. We had a session. We had our first session. And I concluded, I was like, this is it. I'm stopping the process. This is where I'm going. Why is that? Firstly, he taught me about kokorozashi.
Sorry, yeah, just real quick. So this was a trial class?
It wasn't a trial class. We had the one-on-one online consultation.
Ah, okay.
Yes.
And you were in Germany.
I was traveling a lot. I could have traveled somewhere, but yes.
Sorry, I just wanted to kind of set the scene. Yes, but so you had an online consultation.
We had an online consultation. I think my first experience was Sven. Yes.
Sorry, and you were talking about kokorozashi.
Yes, and then what was different, he asked me, Sven, he asked me, okay, so what is it? Why do you want to do MBA and so forth? And I think I gave the traditional response, which everyone does, which is career advancement and so forth and so forth. And then, yeah, valid. I mean, and then he said, but there's got to be more than that. There's got to be a purpose because given your experience, you've got to also think on the social impact, both technically and socio-economically, that you want to be known for. What's your value proposition and so forth. And I was like, okay, I've never really seen it this way. It was all about me, to be quite honest. It was about me, my advancement, my family, my future and their future, but less about the next person. So he really challenged me without really calling it out, but he really challenged me to look beyond just how this journey was going to empower me, how it was going to improve my life, but how it was also going to improve the life of many, known and unknown to me. And I think that conversation really haunted me. Subsequently, I was like, I really need to look from within, what is my purpose? Given my diverse range of experience, where can I make a difference? And it wasn't difficult for me to then realize, okay, I'm actually very passionate on the issues of climate change and combating climate change and so forth. It's something I've done for most of my career. Yeah. And it affects everyone in the world. How do we really save the planet? How do we come about with practical ways of saving a planet where even ordinary people can actually do something on their day-to-day in combating or mitigating against severe natural disasters at times. So yes, and as I said, after that process, I just fell in love with GLOBIS. I was like, this is it. I sort of made a conclusion to say, this is where I'm going. It was, if I were to sum it up, it was how he made me feel. It wasn't just another business school where it's a transaction, where it's like, okay, you're going to do your MBA, and then off you go to corporate or you go to business and so forth. But it was the one that really challenged me to the latter in terms of what are my aspirational statements? What do I stand for? Right. What's my value proposition beyond just what I want to achieve? Right. So, and I had never had such an experience where I'm really challenged beyond thinking within my within my space.
Yeah. Yes. Well, I can tell when you tell that story, like you like even physically, you know, you kind of moved up to the edge of your seat. I can feel the passion radiating off of you, which is amazing. And I think too, when I think about the idea of getting an MBA, like it's a big investment. And like you said as well, or like I guess what Sven said to you as well, career advancement and things like that are valid, but is it worth like making, it's a financial investment, but also as well for you, like coming here as a full-time student, you move across the world, you're basically upending your life to come do this. So I'm really glad that resonated with you. And you're obviously such a passionate guy. And like you said, since you were a young kid, you've always been highly motivated. So one of my favorite things about working at GLOBIS, honestly, is that, I mean, I'm in marketing at GLOBIS, like, you know, that's no secret. This podcast is all about connecting with people and getting the word of GLOBIS out there to the people. But I love hearing these kinds of stories and seeing people like you come here because they have a purpose and they are inspired, and it's not just another tick on the resume. Like there's really more to it than that. And speaking of that, I mean, we were talking about this before the podcast, and you kind of teased that Sven had mentioned this to you as well. But GLOBIS is really big on this concept of kokorozashi, which is a Japanese term that essentially, for those at home, you know, obviously, but basically it's your life mission. I think on one of my bosses she's our first episode, she's the head of student recruitment. She described it as what gets you out of bed on Monday morning. So it's not necessarily, you know, what gets you out of bed in the morning is a very generic term, but it's like, it's helping you find a drive and mission in your career path, I guess I would say. And a big part of the GLOBIS curriculum is developing your kokorozashi, finding your kokorozashi. So of course, I'm curious to hear, you're such a passionate, driven guy. Was that something that resonated with you right away? Like when that question was first levied at you, did you kind of immediately know what your kokorozashi was? Or did it take time for you to develop it? And what is it, if you have one?
Yeah, it was instant. Because I had to look from within to say, what is it that I do effortlessly? And it makes me happy. It gives me peace when I go to sleep. And I realized I've actually participated in a lot of plenary sessions. I've been a guest speaker. I've been a panel member on energy related topics.
You were working in mining, right? for a long time?
Yeah, previously mining,
Yeah.
but recently in international development,
Sure.
so working in climate change and mitigation.
Yeah.
And I was like, look, this is what I've been doing, and I've been doing naturally, where we help communities that don't have resources, for instance, retrofitting energy efficient street lights, dealing with desalination and converting some of the seawater to either for commercial use, for agricultural use, and so forth. And in turn, it helps a lot of people in environments where they're living under abject poverty. They can't really fend for themselves, especially in developing nations. So my kokorozashi, to answer you specifically,
Sure.
derives exactly from that, to say, what is it that I can do for the people that cannot do anything for themselves? They don't have means, either educating in how can we combat climate change, how can we mitigate against some of the natural disasters. I mean, yesterday we were commemorating in Japan 10 years after
True.
Yeah, after the earthquake had
3/11.
taken place, and made the souls of the people who lost their lives continue to rest in peace. But what can we do going forward? What can we do differently? So that is what drives me, and I'm not just limiting it to my country, South Africa, because it's a global phenomenon. It affects everyone anyway. It affects all of us. So we all need to come together and make a difference through small steps and even bigger steps. So that's my kokorozashi. It's driven by making an intentional step on a day-to-day basis, whether keeping our environment clean and safe by not littering, it's as basic as it sounds, or actually doing retrofits by moving from high power sodium to more energy efficient renewables, hydrogen and so forth, technologies, more advanced technologies, in order to make sure that we reduce the carbon emissions. We make sure that there's less air pollutions, especially caused by high industries, in some of the high industrial economies, for instance. So yeah, my kokorozashi is informed by those sentiments. So what I'm hoping, or what I'm working on, is that post my studies, I'm going to be going fully fledged and in making a difference by working with some of the big players. I might not give them free airtime. Yeah, some of big players who are already in the space and doing very good work. But my intention is mostly to educate young people who might have not found purpose for what is it that they want to do with their life.
Sure.
Why don't I train them? Why don't I help them so that they are part of change makers in the issues of climate change and so forth. So it's not just focusing on the technical element, because the technical element does need some sort of academic background, if you know what I mean. Either you've done environmental science or you've done engineering.
Right.
But there's also other things, what we call low-hanging fruits, that everyone, all of us, can have, can take part, such as cleaning our oceans, our seas, such as making sure our streets are clean, such as making sure that we use less of plastics, we become responsible citizens. That doesn't really need much. It just needs an action, and a day-to-day action. So yes, that is how my kokorozashi was formulated.
That's awesome.
Yes.
So you said, I mean, and I can tell again, it's something that you're incredibly passionate about, and it was kind of like this instantaneous, I guess, realization for you. And I think it's incredible too, like how people's careers and what they've done in the past can inform and inspire you to change. Like you can always move forward. I think a lot of people too start to feel like if you get kind of like mid-career, you're stuck and there is no opportunity to move, or it's too risky. But there's always the opportunity for change. And the reason why I brought up, because you had mentioned before you were working for a mining company, right? And it stood out to me that you mentioned that you're really passionate about climate change. And of course, I mean, mining resources and all of that, like it's a fact of life.
Yeah.
But something that immediately sticks out to me is that, you know, obviously it's not the greatest thing for the environment, or I'm sure that there are ways to improve on it over time. And if you're someone that's really passionate about the environment, and you've been working in mining for 8 years, did you say? Or
No, that was in the international development. But prior to that, I worked in the mining sector. Yes.
But I'm sure that got you thinking about things, right?
Yes.
So having that experience, you can bring that into your work at GLOBIS and your future work, and it makes you a more well-rounded individual. So I guess the point that I'm trying to make for anybody like listening, you know, if you feel stuck in what you're currently doing, you can use your past experiences as a catalyst to move forward. It doesn't have to hold you back.
Yeah, talking about mining, as you know, also, for me, yeah, I have a long history with mining, not just at a personal level, as in working. Of course, I've worked for a mine, but as a South African, we have a lot of mines, whether you're talking gold, diamond, but mostly platinum, but mostly we are known for coal mines and manganese mines. Which you know already by now, the impact that coal has in our health, in air pollution, and so forth. So, of course, we are looking at, I'm certainly looking at coming up with better technologies to be responsible, whether it's open cast mining or underground mining, to become more responsible. Firstly, for the health of the people that live around the mines, for the workers that work in the mine, and also for the community in large and all the players, because in the long term, I mean, studies have shown that it affects people negatively in terms of their health. But I think we are fortunate because we have technologies, very good technologies, renewables, hydrogen, and many other technologies that can be deployed in moving from what you call high power sodium or very toxic mining environment that happens by us mining coal to a more, I will say, responsible type of mining. I think another thing that come to mind, we have what we call just energy transition. So how that concept works is that we recognize that you will need an energy mix and you need to be responsible, because you can't just transition and say, I'm moving completely, especially if you're a developing nation like South Africa. You can't just say, I'm moving completely from coal because it's your natural resources. And I'm moving full scale to renewable. That is irresponsible because it affects people's lives in terms of jobs and so forth. So you need to do it in a scalable manner, in a manner that takes everyone in confidence. For instance, you need to repurpose your mines. You need to repurpose the skills of the people that are working there, so that as you transition, you move with them. They are able to have enough skills to work, for instance, or to be relevant as you transition to more renewable. And I see a lot of opportunities in this just energy transition. So we're saying it must be done in a way that is just. So just to the people first, and also just to the planet itself. Because it affects, as I said, not just the socio-economic part of it, but the actual economic aspect of it. So yes, that is how I see it, at least.
It's amazing, man. It makes a lot of sense to me. So you graduate in August of this year, is that correct?
Yes.
So you've been studying at GLOBIS, and I'm curious, as far as like working towards this kokorozashi, like how have you been finding your experience at GLOBIS?
Wow. GLOBIS is different in that the approach is very practical. For instance, our professors or our lecturers, they have experience either as CFO, as COO, in operations, as marketers. You come from marketing. So they have a diverse range of experience. So they are not just your typical academic people coming from the academia. So they have the technical know-how. They have certain approaches. How that has changed me was that during class discussions, the class discussions are very valuable because I bring my experience. My cohorts bring their own experience from the field, because most of us were working, of course. And then the professor also, or the lecturer also bring his perspective on the subject. And then in that way, we then reach a common ground.
Sure.
As opposed to one approach where it's just theory. Of course, theory is good, but you need to mix theory, or you need to collaborate theory with practical, because it's different on the ground. What you learn at school, by and large, it's different in the corporate environment, because corporate is more pragmatic to say, can this work? How will this work? What is the impact, and so forth. Whereas academically, you learn frameworks. Frameworks are very good because they help you, your thinking, they help, especially your critical thinking and so forth. But in a work environment, you now need to say, are they, like for instance, in operation, we say just in time. Are they fit for purpose? Are they good? Just in time, if I need something now, can I really apply this framework? So how the process has helped me is that it has enhanced my already long-standing experience, very diverse range of experience. It has enhanced that, but it has also challenged me, some of my thinking. I mean, critical thinking, as I've mentioned it for the second time, has been one of my most favorite subjects among many subjects, because it really challenges you to the latter in terms of how you address problems, how you see problems, and how you address them. So yeah, it has certainly changed my life. The journey has been amazing. How I was in August last year to how I am now, I am a changed man. I'm definitely a changed man. I think I'm more confident in my craft. I'm more positive in my future prospect, and I'm more confident that I am going to be making a difference. Not just, I don't want to limit myself to a corporate job. Even in other organizations, in my capacity as non-executive director, in boards, in making a difference for instance, in programs that are to emancipate the struggle against patriarchy, for instance, women, to emancipate the vulnerable, the ones that cannot really stand up for themselves. I think the education that I've gained up to now, has really empowered me or validated what I've always had, the invigoration within me to make a difference, not just in corporate, as I said, but in a broad spectrum of life, wherever I'm able to reach.
I'm happy for you, man. Like I can feel it. And it's incredible to hear your story. And I love being able to connect with people that are so passionate and serious about what they're doing. And what really stood out to me too is I see parallels. The way that you talked about language acquisition and learning new languages, I think is similar to your GLOBIS journey, having a purpose behind it. And it's not just like the GLOBIS MBA isn't just studying out of a textbook, right? It's a lot of practicality. And what really stood out to me as well is you're not putting yourself in a corporate box. You don't want to just limit yourself to a potential corporate job. No. I think a lot of people, when they think MBA, that's what they think of. And again, there's nothing wrong with that, right? But I totally feel you. Like, it's so awesome to see you seize this opportunity and use it to drive you forward and do what you want to do, not what, has been prescribed to you by anybody else. And on that note, this has been an amazing conversation, but the final question that we ask all of our guests on the podcast is, knowing everything you know now, going back and talking to a younger Lucky. We talked about this before we started rolling. You can decide how old the younger Lucky is. I think we landed on like 15-year-old Lucky.
Yeah, yeah.
What would your one piece of it, if you could only give one piece of advice and then the time machine sends you back, what would you tell?
I think a 15-year-old Lucky, I would say, trust the process. Sometimes you don't know how to fit all the puzzle and put them together to formulate your actual output and how you want to see them. But as long as you are taking the right steps, as long as you are investing in your future, as long as you are thinking about your future and you are actually doing something about it, just trust the process, because the process will work out.